Thank you for joining your desert frontiersman Alan for more Southwest desert stories. Today, we will be diving into lost Southwest Spanish tales. Please leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. If you would like to help with my channel and time, hit the super thanks heart icon on the bottom of the video and contribute. This is very helpful. Relax and enjoy. Welcome to today's episode of the Southwest Desert, where we'll be exploring the remarkable life and legacy of Father Eusebio Francisco Kino, a Jesuit missionary who played a pivotal role in the history of the American Southwest. Our story begins on May 3, 1700, at San Cayetano del Tumacacore, where Father Kino receives an urgent message. This single day would come to exemplify the courage, compassion, and tireless dedication that defined Kino's mission in the New World. As dawn breaks over the desert landscape, a Native American rider arrives at Tumacacore with a letter from Father Agustin de Campos at San Ignacio del Caborca. The message is clear. Father Kino must hurry if he hopes to save the life of a Native American condemned to be beaten to death by Spanish soldiers, simply for the crime of running away. This moment captures the constant tension Father Kino navigated between his spiritual mission and the harsh realities of colonial expansion. While the Spanish soldiers saw their role as keeping the native population submissive, Kino viewed the indigenous people as fellow human beings worthy of dignity, education, and salvation. Let's take a step back to understand how Father Kino found himself in this pivotal position. Born in 1645 in the Italian town of Segno, Eusebio Kino joined the Society of Jesus, also known as the Jesuits, in 1665 after recovering from a life-threatening illness. During his convalescence, he had made a vow that if he survived, he would dedicate his life to missionary work. True to his word, the young Kino repeatedly petitioned his superiors to be sent on a difficult mission to minister to indigenous people in far-off lands. His persistence paid off, and in 1681, at the age of 36, Kino arrived in Veracruz, Mexico, ready to begin his life's work in the New World. For the next 2 decades, Father Kino would traverse vast stretches of what is now northern Mexico and the American Southwest, particularly the region known as Pimeria Alta, the land of the Upper Pima Native Americans. His mission was not just to spread Christianity, but to improve the lives of the native people he encountered. Kino was more than just a priest. He was an explorer, a cartographer, a rancher, and a diplomat. He was the first to prove that California was a peninsula rather than an island, a geographical fact that had long been debated. But his true passion always remained his work among the indigenous people of the region. Father Kino's approach went far beyond simple religious conversion. He sought to transform the entire way of life for the people he encountered. He introduced European livestock, cattle, sheep, and goats to the region, effectively establishing the first ranches in what would become Arizona. He taught the Native Americans how to be cowboys, farmers, and craftsmen. This practical approach to mission work was revolutionary for its time. Kino believed that by teaching the Native Americans to engage in peaceful, productive pursuits, he could steer them away from warfare and towards a stable Christian way of life. The dozen or so great ranches he established became centers of both spiritual and economic activity, laying the groundwork for future missionaries to continue his work. Now, let's return to that fateful day in May 1700. Despite the urgency of the situation, Father Kino begins his day as he always does, by celebrating Mass. After Mass, Kino mounts his horse and sets off on a grueling journey. He must cover 70 miles of rugged terrain in less than 24 hours if he hopes to reach San Ignacio in time to save the condemned man. The path takes him through what is now Nogales and San Simon before reaching Imuris just before midnight. It's worth noting that at this point, Father Kino was no longer a young man. At 55 years old, such a demanding ride would have been a significant physical challenge, yet his writings betray no hint of complaint or hesitation. For Kino, this was simply part of his calling, another opportunity to serve the people he had dedicated his life to protecting. In the early hours of May 4th, Father Kino arrives at San Ignacio, where he immediately says Mass before turning his attention to the urgent matter at hand. Together with Father Campos, he goes to plead with the military authorities for the life of the condemned Native American. This interaction showcases another of Kino's remarkable skills, his ability to navigate the complex political landscape of colonial New Spain. Though he often found himself at odds with the military authorities, Kino knew how to speak their language and appeal to their sensibilities. In his plea for the Native American's life, Kino employs a mix of moral and practical arguments. He points out that beating a man to death for running away is not only cruel but counterproductive. Such brutality, he argues, would only breed resentment among the native population, ultimately undermining Spain's authority in the region. Justice tempered with mercy, Kino contends, would prove far more effective in maintaining order. Kino's eloquence and reasoning prevail. The military authorities agree to release the Native American, a victory not just for one man's life, but for the broader principle of humane treatment that Kino championed throughout his career. This incident was not an isolated event in Kino's ministry. Throughout his time in the New World, he frequently found himself interceding on behalf of the indigenous people against the harsh treatment of Spanish authorities. His compassion and sense of justice earned him the trust and respect of many native communities, allowing him to make inroads where other missionaries had failed. One particularly poignant example of this occurred in 1695, when Father Francisco Xavier Saita was killed by a band of Pima Native Americans. The Spanish response was swift and brutal, resulting in the deaths of over 50 Native Americans, most of whom, according to Kino, were innocent of any involvement in Saita's death. This indiscriminate retaliation threatened to undo years of Kino's patient work among the Pima. Yet even in this dire situation, Kino's diplomatic skills and commitment to justice shone through. He worked tirelessly to ensure that only those directly responsible for Saita's death were punished, and even then, he advocated for mercy. In a remarkable turn of events, the Native Americans who had participated in Saita's murder were ultimately pardoned after being prepared for death and given the last rites of the Church. This blend of justice and mercy, so characteristic of Kino's approach, helped to repair relations between the Spanish and the Pima, allowing his missionary work to continue. As we reflect on Father Kino's life and work, it's important to understand the broader historical context in which he operated. The late 17th and early 18th centuries were a time of significant expansion and conflict in the Americas. European powers were vying for control of vast territories, often with little regard for the indigenous populations who had called these lands home for millennia. In this tumultuous environment, figures like Father Kino played a complex and sometimes contradictory role. On one hand, they were agents of European colonization, bringing with them a religion and way of life that was foreign to the native inhabitants. On the other hand, many missionaries like Kino genuinely cared for the welfare of the indigenous people and often served as their advocates against the worst excesses of colonial rule. Kino's legacy in the Southwest is profound and enduring. The missions he established became the seeds from which many modern communities grew. His introduction of European livestock and farming techniques transformed the economy of the region. Even today, centuries later, the remains of some of the churches he built still stand as testament to his influence. Perhaps most importantly, Kino's detailed writings and maps provided invaluable information about a part of North America that was largely unknown to Europeans at the time. His observations on the geography, climate, and native peoples of the region continue to be an important resource for historians and anthropologists. But beyond these tangible achievements, it's the spirit of Father Kino's work that truly sets him apart. In an era often marked by cruelty and exploitation, Kino consistently chose the path of compassion and respect. He saw the humanity in the people he encountered, recognizing their dignity and potential at a time when many of his contemporaries viewed them as little more than savages to be conquered or souls to be saved. This is not to say that Kino was perfect or that his actions were always beneficial from our modern perspective. Like all historical figures, he was a product of his time, and his mission was ultimately part of a larger process of colonization that had devastating consequences for many indigenous communities. However, within the context of his era, Kino stands out as a voice for justice and human dignity. His tireless efforts to protect the Native Americans from exploitation, his commitment to education and economic development, and his respect for indigenous cultures set him apart from many of his contemporaries. As our story draws to a close, let's return one final time to that May Day in 1700. After successfully intervening to save the life of the condemned Native American, Father Kino doesn't rest on his laurels. Instead, he continues on his planned journey to Dolores, arriving there on May 6th. For Kino, saving a man's life was simply part of the day's work, an extraordinary act that he treated as ordinary. His life reminds us of the power of perseverance in the face of adversity, the importance of bridging cultural divides, and the profound impact that one dedicated individual can have on the lives of many. While we may not agree with all aspects of his mission, we can certainly admire his courage, his compassion, and his unwavering commitment to improving the lives of those he served. Father Eusebio Francisco Kino, priest, explorer, diplomat, and humanitarian. His story is a testament to the complex tapestry of history, where great achievements often come hand in hand with profound challenges. As we look back on his life from our vantage point in the 21st century, we can appreciate the indelible mark he left on the landscape, the people, and the very soul of the American Southwest. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time. Until next time, may we all strive to face our own challenges with the same courage and compassion that Father Kino displayed on that dusty trail so many years ago. Today, we're diving into a captivating legend that has persisted for centuries, the lost treasure of Delbac. This is a story of Jesuit missionaries, Native American tribes, and a silver mine that may hold the key to a fortune. So sit back, relax, and let's journey to the sun-baked lands of southern Arizona. Our story begins in the year 1700 at a place called San Xavier Delbac. Located on the west bank of the Santa Cruz River, just a few miles south of what is now Tucson, Arizona, this site would become home to one of the most beautiful and enduring missions in the American Southwest. On April 28th of that year, a Jesuit priest named Father Eusebio Francisco Kino wrote in his diary, "We laid the foundation of a very large and spacious church." Little did Father Kino know that this simple act would set in motion a chain of events that would lead to one of the most enduring mysteries in the region. As the foundation was laid and construction began in earnest, something unexpected happened. The headmen of the local Papago tribe approached Father Kino with an intriguing proposition. They wanted to show him something valuable hidden in the nearby mountains. Father Kino followed these tribal leaders into the rugged terrain southwest of Bac. After a journey of about 2 leagues, roughly 6 miles, they arrived at their destination. There, before Father Kino's eyes, was a sight that would change the course of the mission's history, a rich vein of silver ore. The story goes that Father Kino was delighted by what he saw. The ore had a distinctive green color, characteristic of horn silver. Impressed by its appearance, Kino dubbed the site La Esmeralda, the Emerald. Without hesitation, he made arrangements to begin mining operations immediately. In the days that followed, the rich ore was extracted from La Esmeralda and transported to the mission on the backs of Native American workers. At the mission, a small adobe furnace was constructed for smelting the silver. It seemed that San Xavier Delbac was on its way to becoming not just a spiritual center, but a source of significant wealth as well. However, the story of La Esmeralda and its silver was just beginning. Father Kino passed away on March 15, 1711 in Magdalena, Sonora, where his remains still rest in the ruins of the old church. With his death, the missions he had established entered a turbulent period. The years following Kino's death were marked by minor revolts and constant attacks from Apache tribes. Despite these challenges, the mission at San Xavier Delbac continued to prosper. By 1723, the treasure and silver ornaments adorning the altar were estimated to be worth more than 120,000 pesos, a fortune by the standards of the time. But trouble was brewing. In that same year, 1723, the first major revolt of the Papago and Pima tribes erupted. As chaos descended upon the mission, a group of loyal Papago neophytes took matters into their own hands. In a daring move, they secretly carried the treasure from the altar to the Esmeralda mine and buried it deep within its underground workings. This act of preservation came just in time. The revolt left the churches at Bac, Tumacacori, and Guavi partially destroyed and without spiritual advisors. For years, the mission stood silent, their treasures hidden away in the depths of the earth. But the story of San Xavier Delbac was far from over. In 1731, a small group of Jesuit reinforcements arrived in the area. Two of these priests, Father Felipe Segesser and Father Juan Baptista Grasshoffer, established what are considered the first Spanish settlements in Arizona. Father Segesser took charge of San Xavier Delbac, while Father Grasshoffer oversaw San Miguel de Guavi. For the next 2 decades, a succession of Jesuit priests tended to the mission at San Xavier Delbac. They found that many of the native settlements from Kino's time had been abandoned, but they persevered in their efforts to rebuild and maintain the mission. However, peace was short-lived. In 1751, a second revolt of the Pima tribes shook the region. This time, the violence was even more severe. 3 priests, Francisco Xavier Saeta, Thomas Rollo, and Enrique Ruin, lost their lives. The missions at Sonoita and Caborca were completely destroyed, while Guavi, Tumacacori, and San Xavier Delbac were damaged and abandoned by all but a few loyal followers. It wasn't until 1754 that the native tribes returned to their pueblos, expressing a desire to live peacefully once again. With this newfound peace came a momentous event. The great treasure was brought out of hiding from the Esmeralda mine and returned to its place on the altar of San Xavier Delbac. For the next decade or so, San Xavier Delbac experienced a golden age. The mission prospered greatly from agriculture, mining, and stock raising. It became one of the most flourishing outposts in the long chain of missions established during Kino's time. But as we've seen throughout this tale, times of prosperity were often followed by periods of turmoil. In 1767, King Charles of Spain issued a decree that would once again throw the missions into chaos. His edict expelled all members of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, from Spain and its possessions. The Jesuits accepted their expulsion with dignity. Before departing, they took steps to protect the wealth they had accumulated. They sealed the mines and buried their treasures, then made their way to the coast where ships waited to carry them away from the land they had called home for so long. In the wake of the Jesuits' departure, and before the arrival of the Franciscans who were to replace them, many of the missions fell into ruin. San Xavier Delbac was partially destroyed, but it was never completely abandoned. The Papago people, who had come to love the beautiful mission, continued to care for it as best they could. The next chapter in the story of San Xavier Delbac began in 1783, when Padre Carrillo laid the foundations for a new church, the very structure that still stands today, noted for its beautiful mission architecture and still in sacred use. But the tumultuous history of the region wasn't finished yet. In 1822, the fall of the colonial government led to the departure of the Franciscans. San Xavier Delbac and the Esmeralda mine were placed under the care of a secular priest from Magdalena by the Bishop of Sonora. It's a testament to the dedication of the Papago people that despite all these changes, the church and its treasures remained largely intact. When the region was added to the Diocese of New Mexico under Bishop Lamy in 1859, San Xavier Delbac stood as the only mission in the long chain that wasn't in ruins. The arrival of a new priest was met with joy by the Papago. They rang the church bells in celebration, and many still remembered their prayers. Some could even sing at Mass. Most importantly, the articles for the altar, including, presumably, the silver treasures, were once again brought out from their hiding place. In 1860, American miners operating in the area reported seeing the treasure on the altar at San Xavier Delbac. They estimated its value at more than $60,000, an enormous sum for the time. But once again, conflict would disrupt the peace. In 1861, with the outbreak of the American Civil War, soldiers were withdrawn from Arizona to fight in the east. The Apaches seized this opportunity to resume their raids on small mines and ranches, and once again, the great treasure of San Xavier Delbac disappeared. So, what became of this fabled treasure? According to tradition among the local Native Americans, the silver still lies buried deep within the old workings of the Esmeralda mine. They say it rests at the bottom of a large stope that has since caved in, buried under hundreds of tons of rock and earth. But the story doesn't end there. Every year, just before the Feast of San Juan on June 24th, something curious happened. The amount of rich silver ore brought to buyers in Tucson and Nogales showed a marked increase. Most of the silver came from 2 or 3 elderly Papago men who lived near the mission on the banks of the Santa Cruz River. Many old-time Mexican residents of Tucson believe this ore came from the dump and shallow surface workings of the lost Esmeralda mine. It's widely understood in the area that many of the older Papago knew the location of the mine and its treasure, but they steadfastly refused to disclose this information to anyone outside their tribe. And so, the mystery of the lost treasure of Delbac persists to this day. Is there really a fortune in silver hidden somewhere in the mountains near Tucson? Do the Papago elders truly hold the secret to its location? Or is this simply a colorful legend, born from the dramatic history of this beautiful old mission? Whatever the truth may be, the story of San Xavier Delbac and the Esmeralda mine serves as a powerful reminder of the complex history of the American Southwest. It speaks to the intertwining of cultures, Spanish, Native American, and later American, and the enduring impact of the mission system on the region. As you walk the grounds of San Xavier Delbac today, gazing up at its beautiful white towers against the azure Arizona sky, it's hard not to wonder about the secrets it might still hold. Perhaps somewhere in the rugged landscape nearby, the lost silver of La Esmeralda still waits to be rediscovered. This has been the Southwest Desert. I'm your host, Alan, thanking you for joining us on this journey into the legends of the Southwest. Remember, sometimes the most fascinating stories are hidden just beneath the surface, waiting for someone curious enough to uncover them. Until next time, keep exploring and who knows what treasures you might find. In August of 1680, a meticulously planned revolt erupted across the deserts, mesas, and Sangre de Cristo mountains of northern New Mexico. An unlikely alliance formed between 20,000 Native Americans, Pecos, Zuni, Hopi, and Acoma, from 60 pueblos scattered across 70,000 square miles, who had 4 distinct languages and several dialects. They united to drive out the Spanish colonists who had controlled the region for nearly a century. They launched one of the most successful uprisings against European settlers in all of North America during the colonial era. Over the next 12 days, this event, now known as the Pueblo Revolt of 1680, showed the unbelievable resolve of an oppressed people pushed to the brink. Fueled by spiritual convictions and a refusal to abandon ancestral traditions, the outnumbered Pueblo fighters evicted settlers, monks, and governors alike from their homeland. They dealt both a symbolic and strategic blow against the expansionist Spanish Empire. Our story begins in the kivas of Taos Pueblo in 1675, where a medicine man named Pope plotted rebellion after being imprisoned by Spanish authorities for idolatry and evil-doing. Using clever tricks like covering his body with flaming phosphorus, Pope convinced the Pueblos that their gods sanctioned an uprising to overthrow their Spanish overlords. The Pueblos had many grievances under Spanish rule. They were forced to provide tribute labor and products. Their religious practices were banned, and they blamed droughts and disease on the failure of Spanish religion. Pope united a network of far-flung pueblos, sending knotted cords to signify the revolt date. However, when some plotters wavered and Spanish officials captured runners, Pope showed his ruthlessness by killing his own son-in-law for suspected betrayal. Because of this, he moved up the revolt date. On August 10, 1680, a horrific, coordinated massacre began across New Mexico as pueblos rose up, resulting in over 400 Spanish deaths. Friars were martyred in hideous ways, with one padre scourged through a village naked and tied astride a pig until he perished. Spanish settlers fled to Santa Fe. After destroying the remote areas, Pueblo warriors surrounded the capital, using a clever ruse to cut off Santa Fe's water. After 2 days without water and failed negotiations, the beleaguered Spanish retreated south towards Mexico in what an Indian victory song called the Death of the Spanish Gods. With the Spanish gone, Pope banned his followers from speaking Spanish or uttering Christian names, scrubbing themselves in rivers to remove traces of baptism. After destroying all Catholic symbolism, traditional dances and kivas were revived and old idols restored. But Pope soon exploited his heroic status. Clad in finery, he traveled through pueblos, extracting obedience and tribute like a dictator, falling into civil war-inducing decadence before dying in disgrace. Though Spain retook New Mexico in 1692 after years of conflict, the revolt dealt them a lasting blow. It enabled pueblos to preserve more of their old religion, with Spanish authorities adopting increased tolerance after reconquest. So as we marvel at enduring Pueblo dances today, we have crafty manipulator and flawed liberator Pope to thank for this cultural legacy. The Pueblo Revolt deserves more prominence as a transformational event in early Southwestern history. For over 12 years, it completely overturned colonial rule in New Mexico. Its complex legacy continues to shape Pueblo cultural persistence today. It provides potent lessons on the power of united action in the face of injustice, and how people can successfully defend human rights and sacred lifeways against imperial oppression. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Southwest history. Welcome to another episode on Lost Gold from the Southwest Desert Channel. Today, we're exploring the fascinating tale of the lost Josephine mine, a story that has captivated treasure hunters and historians for over 150 years. Our journey begins in the rugged landscapes of the American Southwest, where the legend of the Josephine mine first took root. While many believe the mine to be located in the La Plata Mountains of Colorado or the La Salles of southeastern Utah, our story takes us to an unexpected location, the Henry Mountains of Wayne County, Utah. According to local lore, the origins of the Josephine mine date back to the late 18th century, not long after Father Escalante's historic expedition into Utah in 1776. A group of Spanish prospectors from Santa Fe, New Mexico, set out on a daring quest, following Escalante's trail and crossing the treacherous Colorado River at a place known as the Crossing of the Fathers, about 40 miles upstream from Lee's Ferry. These intrepid explorers then turned northward, traversing the challenging terrain of 50 Mile Mountain before reaching the Henry Mountains. It was here, amidst the 5 peaks of the Henrys, that they began their search for gold. Legend has it that their efforts were rewarded when they discovered an incredibly rich deposit in one of the mountains. The Spanish miners wasted no time in extracting and smelting the precious metal. However, as often happens in tales of treasure, conflict arose when it came time to divide their newfound wealth. To avoid bloodshed, the miners made a fateful decision. They would melt down all the gold and cast it into the form of the Christ child, creating what became known as the Golden Jesus. With their prize in hand, the miners began the long journey back to Santa Fe. But their trials were far from over. As they crossed 50 Mile Mountain, they found themselves under attack by hostile Native Americans. In the chaos that ensued, some of the miners fought off the attackers while others fled with the golden statue, ultimately hiding it in a cave for safekeeping. Only a handful of the original party managed to survive the ordeal and return to Santa Fe. Traumatized by their encounter with the Native Americans, they never ventured back to reclaim their treasure. However, they did create maps of the area, at least one of which is rumored to still exist today. This dramatic tale is believed to have unfolded sometime between 1776 and 1800, setting the stage for a mystery that would endure for generations. But our story doesn't end there. Fast forward to the year 1900 when a prospector named Al Haney enters the picture. Haney was working in New Mexico when fate brought him into contact with a man named Frank Olguin. Olguin was no ordinary prospector. He claimed to be a descendant of one of the original Spanish miners who had discovered the Josephine mine. More importantly, Olguin possessed a map that had been passed down through his family, purportedly showing the location of the lost mine. Intrigued by Olguin's story and the tantalizing map, Haney became convinced that he could relocate the legendary mine. The two men joined forces and set out on an expedition that would lead them not to the commonly suspected locations in Colorado or Utah, but to the Henry Mountains, just as the local legends had suggested. Following the ancient trails marked on their map, Haney and Olguin made their way across the Colorado River at Escalante's Old Ford. They then turned north towards 50 Mile Mountain, guided by a series of small stone monuments that marked a faint trail. Their journey took an exciting turn when they reached the flat summit of the mountain. Near one of the trail markers, they discovered a flat rock bearing an intriguing inscription, a large arrow carved into its surface. Following the arrow's direction led the pair to a hidden cave. On its back wall, they found a lengthy inscription in Spanish, providing further clues and directions to the mine's location. One key landmark mentioned in the inscription was a series of 3 large round concretions that had split open, resembling halved apples. By sighting through these splits, the prospectors could approximate the mine's location. Armed with their map and the newfound information from the cave inscription, Haney and Olguin pressed on. Their persistence paid off when they finally reached a spot that matched the description of the old mine site, a small bench on the side of one of the smaller peaks in the Henrys close to a hidden spring. The site showed promising signs. They found a heap of rocks that appeared to be the ruins of a crude smelter. As they dug around the area, they unearthed quantities of ashes, charcoal, and slag, all indicators of past mining activity. Nearby, they observed rotting stumps of juniper trees, suggesting that wood had been harvested to produce charcoal for smelting operations. Encouraged by these discoveries, Haney and Olgian began an intensive search for the gold-bearing vein. Day after day, they combed the mountainside, their hopes high but their supplies dwindling. Despite their best efforts, they failed to locate any trace of gold ore. Running low on provisions but still hopeful, the men decided to make the 50-mile journey north to Hanksville to resupply. It was during this trip that Haney made an unexpected discovery. He came across numerous caves and cliff dwellings containing beautiful examples of Native American pottery. Recognizing the potential value of these artifacts, Haney gathered as much as he could carry and shipped them from Hanksville to collectors in the east. This side business not only financed their continued search for the mine, but also provided a plausible cover for their presence in the mountains. As time wore on, Frank Olgian grew weary of the fruitless search and eventually left to take up work as a sheep herder. Haney, however, was not so easily deterred. He remained in the area for 2 or 3 more years, driven by the conviction that the lost mine was within his grasp. But even Haney's determination had its limits. When he finally left the Henry Mountains, all he had to show for his years of effort were some fine pieces of pottery and a collection of rock specimens. The mountains, composed primarily of trachyte, a type of igneous rock not typically associated with mineral deposits, had yielded no gold. The only other rock type Haney had found in the vicinity of the old smelter was an outcrop of phonolite, another igneous rock not normally linked to precious metal deposits. The story of the lost Josephine mine might have ended there, fading into the annals of Western folklore. But fate had other plans for Al Haney. 30 years after his expedition to the Henrys, we find Haney living in a city on the Pacific coast. The intervening decades had not been kind to the old prospector. Bad luck and the Great Depression had stripped him of everything, reducing him to selling newspapers on the street to make ends meet. All that remained of his adventurous past was a box of rock specimens, seemingly worthless to anyone but himself. As Haney peddled his papers day after day, his mind often wandered back to the lost Josephine mine. He remained convinced that he had correctly followed the old map and found the remains of the smelter. But the absence of any promising ore deposits continued to puzzle him. The mountain was almost entirely trachyte, with only that isolated outcrop of phonolite nearby. Could it be, Haney wondered, that in this case the typically barren phonolite actually carried gold values? Driven by this nagging question, Haney returned to his old box of samples. He retrieved the dark gray bits of phonolite and examined them once more under a magnifying glass. To the naked eye, not a single particle of mineral was visible. As a last resort, Haney decided to have the samples professionally analyzed, something he had never considered worth the expense before. A week later, Haney returned to the assayer's office, fully expecting to be told that his rocks were worthless. To his astonishment, the assayer seemed unusually agitated as he handed over the report. Haney's eyes widened as he read the results. The sample he had brought in showed an estimated value of $50,000 per ton. Haney could scarcely believe what he was seeing. If the assay report was correct, he had indeed discovered the lost Josephine mine all those years ago. The realization hit him like a thunderbolt. He needed to return to the Henry Mountains immediately and file a claim. But Haney faced a significant obstacle. His entire worldly wealth amounted to just $3 or $4. However, in his mind, this was a minor detail. He was certain he could easily locate the site again, despite the passage of 30 years. Soon, he told himself, he would be rich beyond his wildest dreams. And so, with nothing but hope and determination, Al Haney set out for Utah. He traveled as best he could, hitchhiking when possible and walking when necessary. Eventually, he reached Richfield, Utah, the nearest town on the main highway. From there, he turned eastward toward the Henry Mountains. After a couple more days of travel, the beginning of his desert journey lay before him. The desert that lay between Haney and the Henry Mountains was notoriously treacherous. Even for experienced riders on horseback, the scarcity of water made the crossing perilous. To attempt it on foot was practically suicidal. But Haney, confident in his memory of the terrain and unwilling to share his potential fortune, pressed on alone. 2 days into his solitary trek, Haney stumbled into a sheep camp, barely alive from exhaustion and thirst. The camp's occupant, a herder named Harry Ogden, took pity on the old man, offering him food and a place to rest. Haney shared his story with Ogden and inquired about the locations of waterholes in the area, admitting that the landscape seemed different from his recollections. Ogden, concerned for Haney's well-being, advised him to wait at the camp for a few days. The herder needed to make a supply run to Hanksville and offered to help Haney search for the mine on horseback upon his return. Haney agreed to wait, but his impatience and desire for secrecy got the better of him. As soon as Ogden was out of sight, Haney gathered his meager possessions, filled his coffee pot with water, and set out alone towards the looming Henry Mountains. He was certain that he could find the spot where he had collected his samples years ago, the image of the location still vivid in his mind. This would be the last time anyone saw Al Haney alive. When Ogden returned from Hanksville, he found his camp deserted. Haney had vanished into the unforgiving desert. As days passed with no sign of the old prospector, searching parties were organized, but they found no trace of Haney or his belongings. Harry Ogden became part of the ongoing saga. Ogden claimed to have found the cave on 50 Mile Mountain containing the ancient Spanish inscription. However, unable to read Spanish and lacking any means to copy the text, he left empty-handed. Ogden maintained his intention to return to the site, convinced that the centuries-old markings held the key to unlocking the secret of the incredibly rich, lost Josephine mine. And so, the legend lives on. The Henry Mountains continue to guard their secrets, while the lost riches of the Josephine mine beckon to a new generation of explorers and dreamers. Will the mine ever be found? Or will it remain forever lost, a tantalizing mystery of the American West? Thank you for joining us on another Lost Gold Legend. Until next time, keep exploring, keep dreaming, and who knows, you might just stumble upon a legend of your own. Welcome to today's episode, where we'll be exploring the fascinating legend of Padre LaRue's lost treasure in the Organ Mountains of New Mexico. This tale of gold, faith, and adventure has captivated treasure hunters for generations. Our story begins in 1798 in a small colony in northern Chihuahua, Mexico. A young French priest known as Padre LaRue was tending to his flock of settlers. Times were hard, and the community was struggling with a severe drought that threatened their very survival. One fateful day, a dying soldier arrived at the colony. As Padre LaRue leaned in to hear the man's final words, he received an unexpected gift: the location of a gold deposit in the Sierra de los Órganos, or Organ Mountains. The old soldier, having traveled extensively in the northern regions of New Spain, shared his secret with the Padre, hoping it would save the starving people. The soldier's directions were precise. He told Padre LaRue to travel 10 days north until reaching El Paso del Norte, where the Rio Grande cuts through the mountains. 2 days further north, he would see the stone pipes of the Organ Mountains. At the northern end, he would find a pass and the Spirit Springs. Nearby, at the foot of a high cliff, lay the Cueva Vegas, or Cave of the Meadows, where the gold was hidden. Inspired by this revelation, Padre LaRue gathered his people and presented them with two options: return to Mexico and find homes among friends, or embark on a perilous journey to the Organ Mountains in search of gold. The choice was unanimous: gold. The small band of settlers packed their meager possessions and set out on the Camino Real, the royal highway connecting Santa Fe and Mexico. After 12 grueling days, they arrived at a broad green valley with the towering Organ Mountains on the eastern horizon. They found the Rio Grande, just as the soldier had described, and traded with the Indian village of Tortugas for much-needed supplies. Continuing their journey, they reached the pass at the north end of the Organs. There, they discovered the spirit springs gushing from the rocks and the Cave of the Meadows. It wasn't long before they stumbled upon chunks of milk-white quartz with evident gold content. They had found their promised land. Padre LaRue, ever the wise leader, established rules for their new settlement. All gold was to be brought to him, and he would use it to purchase supplies and equipment from the valley settlements and El Paso. He stressed the importance of keeping their discovery a secret to prevent outsiders from coveting their wealth. As months turned into years, the community prospered. They built a high stone wall around their village and maintained a constant guard. Inside, stone houses bustled with activity and contentment. They constructed arrastras, ore crushers, and adobe smelters to process the gold, which was then stored in the Cave of the Meadows. However, as Padre LaRue had warned, gold often brings trouble. The first sign of discord arose from an unexpected source, the Padre himself. In the excitement of their newfound wealth, he had neglected to report to the church in Mexico City about the colony's progress. This oversight would soon have serious consequences. Back in Mexico City, the church grew concerned about the lack of communication from Padre LaRue. They dispatched a representative, Señor Maximo Miliano, to investigate. Upon arriving at the original colony site, Miliano found only abandoned ruins. His inquiries led him to the Indian village of Tortugas, where he learned of the colony's new location in the Organ Mountains and their discovery of gold. Miliano traveled to Spirit Springs and demanded to see Padre LaRue. When the Padre appeared atop the village wall, Miliano insisted that the mine and all gold bullion be turned over to the church. Padre LaRue firmly refused, stating that the gold belonged to his people and had been revealed to them by God's grace. Angered by this defiance, Miliano returned to Mexico City. Padre LaRue knew that their peaceful existence was now threatened, and he feared the arrival of gold-seeking hordes. But an even greater danger loomed. The local Apache tribes, resentful of the colonists' presence at their sacred spirit springs, had been plotting revenge. One stormy night, they launched a devastating attack on the village. They showered the settlement with arrows, set fire to buildings, and overcame the guards. Padre LaRue made his last stand in the treasure room, guarding the gold until his dying breath. As the attack raged on, a torrential rainstorm broke out. The surviving colonists fled to the canyons and peaks for shelter, listening in terror to the sound of raging floodwaters tearing through their village. When dawn broke and the storm subsided, the survivors returned to find their village in ruins. The mine entrance had been buried under tons of rock and rubble. The Cave of the Meadows, where Padre LaRue had guarded the gold, was hidden behind a wall of stones that would take years to remove. Devastated, the refugees made their way down to the Rio Grande Valley, where they found refuge among the Mexican colonists who had recently settled there. But the legend of Padre LaRue's gold lived on. In the generations that followed, countless treasure seekers have scoured the Organ Mountains, hoping to uncover the lost gold. The land, once part of Chihuahua, now lies in southern New Mexico, but the allure of the treasure remains as strong as ever. Some tantalizing clues have emerged over the years. In 1907, a prospector claimed to have been shown the old cave by Teso Aguirre, a descendant of one of the original Spirit Springs colonists. However, the actual treasure remained elusive. Colonel A.J. Fountain of Las Cruces, New Mexico, reported finding an old record in either the Masilla Mission or the Dona Ana Mission that described the richest mine in the Spanish Americas, located near the present-day town of Oregon, New Mexico. Another intriguing account tells of Spanish refugees stopping in El Paso on their way from Mexico to Spain. They reportedly possessed a church record from Mexico City that gave the exact location of the Spirit Springs mine. Yet, despite these proofs, no one has ever managed to locate the legendary treasure. In later years, the streets of Las Cruces buzzed with tales of Padre LaRue's gold. Local lore speaks of explorers stumbling upon strange caves containing stone couches carved from rock, stained with what appears to be ancient blood. These stories continue to fuel the imaginations of modern-day treasure hunters. The Organ Mountains, with their rugged peaks and hidden canyons, remain a magnet for those dreaming of striking it rich. Men and women continue to spend their lives searching, digging and exploring every nook and cranny of this unforgiving terrain. They're all driven by the hope that just around the next bend, or perhaps in that unexplored cave, they'll finally uncover the golden treasure of Padre LaRue. As we conclude our tale, it's worth noting that while most historical records fail to mention Padre LaRue, the persistence of this legend suggests there may be a grain of truth hidden somewhere in the story. Whether fact or fiction, the tale of Padre LaRue's lost treasure continues to captivate the imagination and drive exploration in the Organ Mountains of New Mexico. The story serves as a reminder of the powerful allure of gold and the enduring nature of legends. It speaks to the human desire for adventure, the quest for sudden wealth, and the romantic notion of uncovering long-lost secrets. While the gold may never be found, the legend of Padre LaRue ensures that the Organ Mountains will always be a place of mystery and possibility. As you drive through southern New Mexico and catch a glimpse of the Organ Mountains on the horizon, take a moment to imagine the determined colonists led by Padre LaRue, the fierce Apache warriors, and the countless treasure seekers who have combed these peaks over the centuries. Who knows? Perhaps the next person to uncover the truth about Padre LaRue's gold could be you. Thank you for joining us for this exploration of one of the Southwest's most enduring legends. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your sense of adventure alive. You never know what secrets might be hiding just around the corner. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the Southwest Desert. Today, we're delving into a fascinating tale from the American Southwest, the legend of the lost treasure of Old Guavi. This story takes us back to the 18th century, to a time when Jesuit missionaries were establishing their presence in what is now Arizona, Sonora, and Lower California. So sit back, relax, and let's journey through time to uncover the secrets of Guavi. Our story begins in 1767, a pivotal year in the history of the New World. King Charles of Spain had just issued a decree that would change the course of history for many in the Americas. The edict called for the expulsion of all Jesuit fathers from the New World, forcing them to abandon the missions they had worked so hard to establish. But here's where the legend takes root. As the story goes, these Jesuit fathers, faced with their sudden expulsion, didn't leave empty-handed. Instead, they allegedly buried great caches of gold, silver, and jewels before their hasty departure. This act of desperation gave birth to a legend that has persisted for centuries, captivating the imaginations of treasure hunters and history buffs alike. Please forgive any mispronunciations. Now, let's focus our attention on one particular mission, Guavi. Located near the small farming community of Calabasas, a short distance northeast of Nogales, Arizona, Guavi was no ordinary mission. Established in 1691, it stood as a testament to the Jesuit presence in the region for over 7 decades. While many regarded Guavi as primarily an agricultural mission, rumors suggest it held a secret. The Padres, in need of metal for various purposes, are said to have sent Native American miners into the surrounding hills in search of suitable ores. Little did they know that this seemingly innocent quest for materials would lead to a discovery that would change the mission's fate. According to local lore, the Native American miners brought back specimens of heavy black silver-copper ore. This ore is believed to have come from the head of a rocky canyon in the southwest end of the rugged San Cayetano Mountains, just a short distance north of the mission. The Padres were delighted with their find. They used the ore to mold bells for the church, and the result was so pleasing that they decided to continue working the mine. Soon, ore was being regularly mined and transported on the backs of mules to a furnace constructed near the mission. What started as a practical endeavor soon turned into something more. After supplying the altar with beautiful hand-molded candlesticks and other articles, the Padres turned their attention to creating everyday items. They fashioned cups, plates, bowls, and other household utensils from the silver recovered from smelting the rich ore. The mine's proximity to the mission added to its allure. It's said that on a still day, the miners could hear the sweet-toned bells ringing and the dogs barking in the little pueblo on the east bank of the wide arroyo. As the mission's wealth grew, so did the complications. Under Spanish law, 1/5 of all bullion from mines worked by the Jesuits belonged to the King of Spain, known as the Royal Fifth. However, rumors suggest that the Jesuits weren't always diligent in paying this royal tax. This alleged failure to pay the Royal Fifth is believed to be one of the reasons behind King Charles III's decision to expel the Jesuits. The growing tensions between the Crown and the Jesuit order would soon come to a head, with dramatic consequences for missions like Guavi. The years leading up to the expulsion were not peaceful for Guavi and other missions in the region. In 1750, the second revolt of the Pima tribes erupted. This uprising resulted in the murder of Padres at Caborca and Sonoita, and the beautiful missions of San Xavier and Guavi were plundered and partially destroyed. Despite these setbacks, the Jesuits persevered, continuing their work at Guavi and other missions. Little did they know that their time in the New World was drawing to a close. When King Charles III's edict reached the New World in 1767, it set off a chain of events that would give rise to the legend we're exploring today. Faced with sudden expulsion and unable to take their accumulated wealth with them, the Jesuits reportedly took drastic action. According to the legend, they sealed the entrances to their mines and buried their treasures. At Guavi, it's said that the bells, altar service, candlesticks, and all manner of household and cooking utensils were collected and stored in a secret hiding place near the mission ruins. The Jesuits then fled to the coast, hoping to board ships that would return them to Spain. Tragically, many of them never made it, falling victim to hostile Native Americans along the way. For nearly a century, Guavi and its supposed hidden treasures lay dormant. It wasn't until 1859 that the first Americans arrived in the Santa Cruz Valley. What they found reignited interest in the old Jesuit missions and their potential riches. These early American settlers discovered large piles of slag at various locations, including Tubac, Tumacacori, Cerro Colorado, and Guavi. Much of this slag was rich in silver, and enterprising miners shipped it off at a good profit. At Guavi itself, most of the land where the old adobe smelter and slag pile stood has since been cultivated. While there are no visible signs of the old furnace, farmers occasionally turned up rich pieces of silver ore with their plows, keeping the legend alive. Our story now shifts to the early 1900s, focusing on a character who adds another layer of intrigue to the Guavi legend. Meet Juan Bustamante, an old woodchopper and pocket miner who lived near the mission ruins in about 1912. Juan made his living panning for gold in the summer and selling stove wood in Nogales during the winter. He was a familiar face at Charlie Taylor's assay office, where he would sell small vials of placer gold. But one hot summer day, Juan surprised everyone by arriving at Taylor's office with his 2 burros loaded down with sacks of rich silver ore instead of his usual cargo. This unexpected delivery caused quite a stir among the local miners, but Juan refused to disclose the source of his newfound wealth. Juan's silver deliveries became an annual event, always occurring around the feast of San Juan on June 24th. This timing wasn't coincidental. There's a superstition among many old-time Spanish Americans that bathing in running water on San Juan Day ensures good health for the coming year. So every year after his ritual bath, Juan would load his faithful burros with rich silver-copper ore and head to Nogales for the Fiesta of San Juan. It was during one of these festive trips that Juan inadvertently revealed a clue to his secret. On the second day of a particularly lively fiesta, Juan, full of his beloved red wine and traditional foods, dozed off for a siesta. In his troubled sleep, the old prospector talked loudly about a rich silver mine he had discovered high up in a rocky canyon on the southwest side of the rugged San Cayetano mountain. A newly made friend who was not quite as inebriated overheard Juan's sleep-talking. The day after the fiesta, this man set out with a companion to search for the mine Juan had unwittingly described. After several days of hard work, the 2 Mexican searchers found some very heavy silver-copper ore at the mouth of a deep, rocky canyon that matched Juan's drunken description. High up near the head of the canyon, they made another intriguing discovery, a partly burned crucifix that appeared to have been washed out of a tunnel. This find was significant because Mexican and Native American miners traditionally place a crucifix at the mouth of any mine they're working. The crucifix was taken to the Tumacacori mission, where it remained for many years. Despite their initial success, the 2 men were unable to locate the actual rich vein or the old tunnel during their subsequent trips. The heavy rains that frequently occur in the area had likely covered any remaining traces. Unaware that he had revealed his secret, Juan continued to make several clandestine trips to the mine after the fiesta. His last load of ore was purchased by Taylor for $150, a significant sum at the time. The day after this final sale, Juan arrived at his son-in-law's house with his 2 burros loaded down with provisions and a supply of his beloved red wine. Tragically, he was found dead on his pallet the next morning, taking the secret of the mine's location with him to his grave. To this day, neither Juan's mine nor the great treasure supposedly buried near the mission walls has ever been found. The rooms of Guavi stand empty, the voices of the Padres, Native American children, and neophytes long since silenced. All that remains of the once thriving mission are a small part of the thick adobe walls, a remnant of the altar, and a few silent graves. These sparse ruins serve as a poignant reminder of the Padres and the indigenous people who once called Guavi home. And so, dear listeners, we come to the end of our tale. The lost treasure of old Guavi remains just that, lost, but the legend continues to captivate imaginations and draw curious visitors to this day. Perhaps somewhere in the rugged landscape surrounding the old mission, beneath layers of earth and time, lie the riches of Guavi, the silver bars, the ornate candlesticks, the beautifully crafted utensils. Or perhaps the true treasure is the story itself, a testament to the complex history of the American Southwest and the enduring allure of hidden wealth. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time and legend. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, And who knows? Maybe you'll be the one to uncover the next great hidden treasure. I hope you enjoyed these lost Southwest Spanish tales. Please leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. Until next time, happy trails.